The courtroom door slammed shut, echoing like a gunshot. Amara stood alone at the defendant's table, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. At 16, she never imagined her fight for justice would lead her here, facing a judge who looked at her like she was less than human. It started with a protest. Amara, a bright high school junior, had organized a peaceful march in her small town of Crestwood to demand accountability after a black teenager was wrongfully arrested by local police. Her signs were bold, her voice louder, calling out systemic racism in a place where people pretended it didn't exist. The march was meant to be a spark, a way to wake up a sleepy town. But when a few agitators later revealed to be outsiders threw bottles, the police swooped in. Amara, trying to calm the crowd, was singled out, handcuffed, and charged with inciting a riot. Now, here she was, in a courtroom that felt more like a lion's den. Judge Harold Grayson presided, his reputation as a hardliner preceding him. He was a man in his late 50s, with a permanent scowl etched into his face, his graying hair slicked back, and a demeanor that screamed authority. From the moment Amara stepped into his courtroom, she felt his eyes dissect her not as a person, but as a problem. Her public defender, a nervous young man named Tim, fumbled with his notes, clearly intimidated by Grayson's presence. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Linda Hayes, laid out the charges with cold precision, inciting violence, disturbing the peace, and resisting arrest. Each word felt like a brick piling onto Amara's chest. "Do you understand the charges, Miss Johnson?" Grayson's voice dripped with condescension, his lips curling as he said her name. Amara nodded, her jaw tight. "Speak up, girl," he snapped, leaning forward. "This isn't one of your little street rallies. Use your words." The room went silent. Amara's hands balled into fists at her sides. She wanted to scream, to tell him she wasn't just some girl, but a student with straight A's, a daughter, a dreamer. Instead, she forced out, "Yes, Your Honor," her voice steady despite the fire in her chest. Grayson chuckled, a low, mocking sound that made Tim flinch. "Oh, we've got a polite one here," he said, glancing at the prosecutor as if sharing a private joke. "Let's see how polite you stay when you're facing juvie." The gallery murmured, a mix of discomfort and agreement. Amara's mother, sitting in the front row, gripped her purse so tightly her knuckles paled. Amara caught her eye, drawing strength from her mother's silent support. The trial moved quickly, too quickly. Linda Hayes painted Amara as a reckless agitator, twisting her activism into a narrative of chaos. "This defendant organized an event that spiraled into violence," she said, holding up photos of the protests' aftermath: broken glass, overturned trash cans. She knew the risks and chose to ignore them. Amara wanted to shout that those weren't her people, that she'd begged everyone to stay peaceful, but Tim whispered for her to stay quiet. She bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. When it was Tim's turn, he stammered through a weak defense, citing Amara's clean record and her academic achievements. But Grayson barely listened, his eyes fixed on Amara with a mix of disdain and amusement. "So, you think you're some kind of hero, do you?" he interrupted, cutting Tim off. "Marching around, stirring up trouble, thinking you can change the world?" His voice grew louder, sharper. "You're nothing but a loudmouth kid who doesn't know her place." The words hit like a slap. Amara's breath caught, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. The gallery erupted in whispers, some nodding in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably. Her mother stood, her voice trembling but firm. "That's enough, Your Honor. She's just a child. Sit down, or you'll be removed." Grayson barked, banging his gavel. Amara's mother sank back into her seat, her eyes locked on her daughter, a silent apology in her gaze. Amara felt the weight of every stare in the room, the judgment, the prejudice. She wanted to run, to hide, but she stood taller, her chin lifted. She wouldn't let this man break her. Grayson leaned back, smirking. "You know, Miss Johnson, people like you always think they're above the law. You think you can scream about injustice and get away with causing a mess. Well, not in my courtroom. He paused, letting the silence stretch, his eyes scanning her like she was an exhibit in a zoo. What do you have to say for yourself? Amara's heart raced. She knew anything she said would be twisted, but she couldn't stay silent. I was trying to stand up for what's right, she said, her voice clear despite the tremor in her hands. I didn't start any violence. I wanted peace. I wanted justice for someone who didn't get it. Grayson laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Justice? You. You're barely out of diapers, and you're talking about justice? He turned to the prosecutor. Ms. Hayes, I hope you've got a good recommendation for this one. I'm thinking community service won't cut it. Maybe a few months in juvenile detention will teach her some respect. The room spun. Amara's knees felt weak, but she locked them, refusing to show weakness. Juvenile detention. The words echoed in her mind, a nightmare she hadn't prepared for. She thought of her little brother, who looked up to her, of her mother's late nights working 2 jobs to keep them afloat. She thought of her dreams: college, a law degree, a life where she could fight for others. Was it all slipping away because of one man's bias? Tim tried to object, his voice shaky. Your Honor, my client has no prior record. She's a model student, involved in her community. Enough. Grayson snapped, slamming his gavel again. I've heard enough of this bleeding heart nonsense. This girl needs to learn there are consequences for her actions. She can't just run around causing chaos and expect a pat on the back. The tension in the room was suffocating. Amara felt every eye on her, some pitying, some accusing. She wanted to scream that she hadn't done anything wrong, that she was being punished for existing, for daring to speak out. But before she could, the courtroom doors swung open with a force that silenced everyone. A man strode in, his presence commanding the room. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a tailored suit that spoke of authority. His dark skin gleamed under the courtroom lights, and his eyes, Amara's eyes, burned with a quiet fury. It was her father, Daniel Johnson, a man few in Crestwood knew by face but many knew by name. He was the district attorney, a position he'd earned through years of grit and brilliance, a fact Grayson had conveniently overlooked. Excuse the interruption, Your Honor, Daniel said, his voice calm but laced with steel. But I believe you're addressing my daughter. Grayson's face froze, his gavel hovering midair. The color drained from his cheeks as recognition hit. The gallery buzzed, heads turning, whispers spreading like wildfire. Amara's heart leapt, a mix of relief and pride. Her father rarely showed this side of himself, controlled, yes, but unyielding when it mattered. Your daughter. Grayson stammered, his bravado crumbling. I wasn't aware. You weren't aware because you didn't care to be, Daniel cut in, stepping forward. You saw a young black girl and decided she was guilty before she even opened her mouth. You mocked her, belittled her, and threatened her with detention for exercising her right to speak out. Is that how justice works in your courtroom, Harold? The use of Grayson's first name was a deliberate jab, and it landed hard. The judge's mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for air. Amara watched, her breath held, as her father took control of the room. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. His presence was enough. I've reviewed the case, Daniel continued, addressing the room now. The charges against my daughter are flimsy at best. The evidence shows she was trying to de-escalate, not incite. Witnesses confirm it. Video footage confirms it. Yet you, Judge Grayson, chose to ignore all of that and turn this into a personal attack. Why? Because she's young? Because she's black? Or because she dared to challenge a system you're comfortable upholding? The gallery was silent now, every word hanging heavy. Grayson's hands trembled slightly as he set the gavel down. Mr. Johnson, I assure you, I was only. Save it, Daniel said, his tone final. I'm not just her father. I'm the district attorney, your direct superior in this county's judicial system. And I'm telling you now, this case is over. The charges are dropped. And we're going to have a long conversation about how you run your courtroom." Amara's knees nearly buckled with relief. Her mother let out a sob, rushing to her side, wrapping her in a fierce hug. The gallery erupted, some clapping, others whispering furiously. Grayson sat back, his face a mask of shock and humiliation, his authority stripped bare in front of everyone. But the fight wasn't over. As Amara hugged her mother, she caught Grayson's eye. There was no apology there, only resentment. She knew this moment, this victory, was just one battle in a much larger war. Her father had saved her today, but what about the others? The kids who didn't have a district attorney for a dad, who faced judges like Grayson and lost. Her resolve hardened. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning. As they left the courtroom, Amara's father put a hand on her shoulder. "You did good, kid," he said softly. "You stood up for what's right, even when it was hard. I'm proud of you." Amara smiled, tears finally spilling over. "I learned from the best," she said, squeezing his hand. Outside, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over Crestwood. For the first time in weeks, Amara felt hope. Not because the system was fixed, it wasn't, but because she knew she wasn't alone in fighting it. As Amara and her family stepped out of the courthouse, the cool evening air hit her face, a stark contrast to the stifling tension inside. The weight of the day clung to her, but her father's hand on her shoulder grounded her. Daniel's car was parked just across the street, and as they walked toward it, a small crowd gathered, reporters, activists, and curious onlookers who'd heard whispers of the courtroom drama. Camera flashes popped, and a young woman with a microphone shoved her way forward. "Amara. How do you feel after what happened in there?" she shouted. Amara froze, her mother's arm tightening around her. She wasn't ready for this, not yet. But Daniel stepped in, his voice calm but commanding. "My daughter's been through enough today. We'll release a statement soon. For now, let her breathe." The crowd parted, and Amara felt a surge of gratitude for her father's quiet strength. But as they drove away, she couldn't shake the image of Judge Grayson's face, his smugness shattered, yes, but his resentment burning bright. She knew this wasn't over. Back home, the Johnson household was a whirlwind of emotion. Amara's younger brother, Malik, ran to her, his 10-year-old eyes wide with worry. "Are you going to jail?" he asked, his voice small. Amara knelt, pulling him into a hug. "No way, little man. I'm right here." Her mother, Grace, busied herself in the kitchen, making tea nobody would drink, her hands shaking as she tried to process the day. Daniel sat at the dining table, already on the phone with his team, discussing next steps. Amara caught snippets, words like investigation, bias, and reprimand. Her father was a man of action, and he wasn't letting Grayson off lightly. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She sat on her bed, scrolling through her phone, where news of the trial was already spreading. Local blogs called her a teen activist, while others branded her a troublemaker. X posts were a mixed bag. Some praised her courage, others echoed Grayson's disdain, calling her a wannabe revolutionary. One post stung the most: she got off because of her daddy. Typical. Amara's fingers hovered over the keyboard, itching to respond, but she stopped. Words online wouldn't change minds like Grayson's. She needed something bigger. The next morning, Daniel called a family meeting. "Amara, what happened yesterday can't just be a moment," he said, his eyes serious. "Grayson's not the only one out there. The system's full of people who'll judge you before they know you. What do you want to do about it?" Amara thought of the protest, the march that had landed her in court. She thought of the kids in her school, the ones who'd whispered support but were too scared to join her. She thought of the boy whose arrest had sparked it all, still sitting in a cell because he didn't have a father like hers. "I want to keep fighting," she said finally. "But not just for me. For everyone who doesn't get a second chance." Daniel nodded, a proud smile breaking through. Then let's do it right. No more getting caught in the chaos. We organize, we educate, we push for change legally, strategically. You're young, but you've got a voice. Use it. Over the next few weeks, Amara threw herself into action. With her father's guidance, she connected with local activists, including a woman named Tanya, who ran a community center focused on youth empowerment. Tanya was a forstall, with a voice that could fill a room and a laugh that made you feel safe. She helped Amara plan a series of workshops at the center, teaching kids their rights, how to navigate the legal system, and how to advocate without breaking. Amara spoke at the first session, her voice shaky at first but growing stronger. I stood in a courtroom where a judge told me I didn't belong, she said to a room of wide-eyed teens. But I'm still here. And you can be too. Meanwhile, Daniel wasn't idle. As district attorney, he launched an internal review of Grayson's cases, focusing on potential bias. The findings were damning. Over the past 5 years, Grayson had disproportionately sentenced Black and Latino defendants to harsher penalties than their white counterparts for similar offenses. The data was cold, hard, undeniable. Daniel presented it to the county's Judicial Oversight Board, demanding Grayson's suspension pending a full investigation. The board, wary of the growing public outcry fueled by Amara's story going viral, agreed. Grayson's fall was swift but not silent. He fought back, hiring a lawyer and giving interviews to local news outlets, claiming he was being targeted for doing his job. I treat everyone the same, he insisted on a talk radio show, his voice thick with indignation. This is a witch hunt led by a man with a personal vendetta. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the public wasn't buying it. Protests outside the courthouse grew, with signs reading, "No justice, no peace," and "Fire Grayson." Amara watched it all unfold, a mix of satisfaction and unease. She wanted justice, not revenge, but the line felt blurry. At school, things were harder. Some kids hailed Amara as a hero, slipping her notes of support or asking to join her workshops. Others, though, whispered behind her back, calling her a snitch or worse. One day, a group of older boys cornered her in the hallway. "Think you're untouchable now, huh?" one sneered. "Your dad can't save you here." Amara's heart raced, but she stood her ground, staring them down until a teacher intervened. She didn't tell her parents she didn't want them to worry, but it lit a fire in her. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. The turning point came a month later, when Grayson's suspension hearing was scheduled. Amara insisted on attending, despite her mother's protests. "I need to see it through," she told Grace, her voice firm. The hearing was held in a larger courtroom, packed with press, activists, and community members. Grayson sat at the front, his face a mask of defiance, his lawyer whispering in his ear. Amara sat with her family, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the man who'd tried to break her. The board presented the evidence, case after case where Grayson's rulings showed clear bias. A black teenager sentenced to 6 months for shoplifting, while a white teen got community service for the same crime. A Latino man given 3 years for a minor drug charge, while a white defendant walked with probation. The numbers painted a picture of a man who saw race before he saw people. Grayson's lawyer argued that the data was misleading, that his client was simply tough on crime. But the room wasn't swayed, and neither was the board. When it was time for public comments, Amara stood. Her legs shook, but her voice didn't. "I'm Amara Johnson," she began, her words echoing in the silent room. "A month ago, Judge Grayson looked at me and saw a stereotype. He mocked me, threatened me with jail, not because of what I did, but because of who I am. I'm not here to beg for an apology. I'm here to say this can't keep happening. Not to me, not to anyone. If we want justice, we need judges who see us as people, not problems." The room erupted in applause. Grayson's face reddened, his hands gripping the table. Amara sat down, her heart pounding, but she felt lighter, like she'd finally said what needed saying. Her father squeezed her hand, his eyes shining with pride. The board deliberated for hours, but when they returned, their decision was unanimous. Grayson was removed from the bench, effective immediately. The aftermath was bittersweet. Grayson's removal was a victory, but it didn't erase the damage he'd done not to Amara, not to the countless others who'd faced his gavel. Amara's workshops grew, drawing kids from across the county, and she started a podcast with Tanya, sharing stories of young people fighting for change. The boy whose arrest had sparked her protest was released after new evidence came to light, and Amara was there when he walked free, hugging his mother as they cried. It felt like a step, but only a step. At home, life settled into a new normal. Malik started joining Amara at the community center, passing out flyers with a grin. Grace, inspired by her daughter, began volunteering with a legal aid group, helping families navigate the system. Daniel, ever the strategist, pushed for broader reforms, meeting with judges and lawmakers to address bias in the courts. Amara watched it all, knowing her family was her foundation, but also knowing the fight was hers to carry forward. One evening, as she sat on the porch with her father, watching the stars, Daniel broke the silence. "You know, Amara, what you did took guts. Not just in court, but every day since. You're changing things, even if it doesn't always feel like it." Amara smiled, her heart full. "I just want to make sure no one else has to feel like I did in that courtroom." "You will," he said, his voice certain. "But it's not just about you anymore. It's about all of them, the kids, the families, the ones who don't have a voice yet. Keep giving them one." As Crestwood's lights twinkled below, Amara felt the weight of that responsibility, but also its hope. The system wasn't fixed, but it was cracking, and she'd keep pushing until it broke open. She thought of Grayson, now a footnote in her story, and realized his fall wasn't the point. The point was what came next, the world she'd helped build, one where justice wasn't a privilege, but a right. What do you think? Where do we draw the line between justice and vengeance? How do we heal a community when trust in the system is broken?